Hi, this is Paul, and I've got another one of the Randos that I met at Midwestuary. This is Brad, and Brad has a twin brother, an identical twin brother, who is also involved in the TLC. And we spoke at Midwestuary and talked about doing something in terms of um, something kind of special because of their relationship and because of how things are going. And so, not quite sure how this all will go, but we might as well begin. And we'll begin with how we always begin, which will be with Brad and his story. So, Brad, why don't you begin by telling me something about yourself and something about the home you grew up in, and we'll take it from there.
Sounds good. Thank you, Paul. Um, yeah, I'm Brad, and I do have a twin brother named Brian. Brian has been on Grail Country and been seen with Nate Heil there, and we have a
If
lot
you're
of
going to sit
commonality.
back from the computer that far, you're really going to have to speak up or lean forward. That computer mic really likes different computer mics are sort of tweaked in different ways. So that's you'll be able to hear you much better this way. Yep.
I'm more comfortable sitting back, so I'm gonna try this. Okay, I'll speak up a little. My brother and me have similar stories, of course, but the whole thing I'm wanting to explore with Paul and with Brian and with whoever can help us, we are trying to figure out how it is that we could be really separate people and still be, you know, I guess we've grown up and thought of each other so closely as twins that even in our late years, midlife, we're figuring out what it means to be unique. And it came to a head with us, or it came to my attention most vividly when we both parted ways. We both parted ways with our politics in 2020. So we're talking about a 5 year difficulty. I would say my brother doesn't agree that his experience of it is not that it was difficult. It's more just challenging and important. But I've found it pretty trying at times. But anyway, I wanted to just say how I got into the little corner was I am a registered nurse, but I was a pastor, a United Methodist pastor for 18 years full time. Before I went to nursing school in 2018, and then I went part time with my church. And then the intent was to get out of ministry because of my moving from county to county in Mississippi was wearing on my family. So I wanted to do something where I could stay put. Uh, Moving every 3 to 4 years was the routine. But no longer after I went to nursing school and was able to work locally for the past 5 years. I've been a full time nurse.
So
In the
in the
local.
United Methodist Church, which has bishops, so your bishop would move you every 3 to 4 years to a different church. And
That's
then you would, because, my father had something similar. My grandfather moved like every 4 to 6 years, but they didn't have bishops, so they weren't directed, but that was just sort of how it worked. But
oh,
yeah, that's hard on a family.
it really, yeah. And I was never ordained as a pastor. I went to divinity school and got my, MDiv. Never ordained because when I got into United Methodism, it was going to require me to get another degree under the schools that they approve of. So I sort of rebelled against that in a way and said, no, I'm just going to stick with the local pastor route, take small churches. But that did lend us to moving probably more often and further away than we would have. But all that to say, I was sort of out of the loop with things even through 2020 with Jordan Peterson. 2021 when he got back on the scene, I was had sort of been watching some things about um, on I guess Paul your channel late 2020, and then when Jonathan Pajot and Jordan Peterson did their Perfect Mode of Being, I think that was in March of 2021. I caught on, and that's when I started really following closely. But I've been pretty involved and went to the uh, I went to the Symbolic World Summit back in February, March of 2024, and this past year last month went to Midwestuary. Uh, and I've been a lurker ever other than those two things.
Okay.
Total lurker. And that's a lot of it too, is I can talk to my brother, my twin brother, we're perfectly comfortable. But getting into bigger conversations with other people has always it's given me great anxiety. And but I still have a voice, and I've done a lot of writing. I want to do more writing, but I think, as we've talked about on the corner, I've heard it talked about, the printing press is going away and the age of the computer is here. So I'm trying to adjust to that. But a little bit about me. I wanted to tell you, this was my Jordan Peterson room that we're sitting in. I took the challenge to make one room beautiful in my house that I could control. But it's not as easily done as I thought, because I want to show you, this is my Zoom room. This is the version that I want Zoom to see.
Looks
But
beautiful.
thank you. Uh, it was when I left the church, as you might imagine, Paul, I had boxes and boxes of books. I had keepsakes. I had things that were stuffed into closets that I didn't want to throw away. And it was in my church study. But when I got out of ministry, I needed a place to put all that. And we didn't have an extra room in the house. Two kids, um, 29 years of marriage. We've accumulated a lot of things, moved from parsonage to parsonage all these years. So I threw all my church furniture and books in this room, and it remained so for about 2 years. This was a front room of our house, and it was a storage room.
Oh.
So I realized, you know, I need to work on that. So, Jordan's, my whole life was sort of has come in ways unraveled that I didn't expect in changing careers. My
Mm.
family's intact, thankfully.
Yeah.
My children came of age around the time of COVID hitting. They got their licenses not long afterwards, and
Okay.
we just had a lot of enormous change over the last 5 to 7 years. And this room has been I guess I've let it represent my own soul. I knew I needed to work on some things, and I knew
Mm.
that clutter and stored up knowledge that was no use to anyone was just bad. That's
Yeah.
that's the definition of Gnosticism.
Yeah.
So my books, my boxes, my things. I said, what am I gonna do with the rest of my life? I need to shape things up. I'm a C.S. Lewis um, connoisseur, I guess, of his work,
Yeah.
and I'll say more about that later. But I'll turn so you can see the rest of the room. I moved my computer up so my feet are jammed. Let's see. I don't know. I'll have to talk to see what you're looking at.
Oh, wow. Big board up there.
I got a few notes because I have to control things a little bit.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
look, I've got a. It's not such a messy room, but things
It's a
aren't as
lot
neat.
better than my office.
They aren't as neat as they look. Of what I was trying to present. Um, but what I wanted to show you now is the picture of the lion. That's called the stained glass lion, and that's not an original artwork that I know of. It's of anything I know. It's probably AI that made it. I have no idea. But it is a stained glass picture of a lion that when I saw it, of course, I thought I was in Narnia.
Mm.
It's not just a picture, it's a puzzle. And every
Mm.
year I put together a puzzle in January or late December.
Okay.
It's my way of slowing down, unplugging, because you have to focus on something for a long time and get off
Yep.
the phone and just pay attention to what's in front of you.
Yep.
That's your grace.
Yeah.
But particularly this year, I was putting together this puzzle, and it was my 50th birthday week, and I was depressed because of that. In a way, I've, like I said, for the past 3 to 5 years, I've been coming out of, well, dealing with disappointment and grief and other things, personal stuff, and so I felt like the White Witch had me pretty good.
Mm.
And I live on the coast of South Mississippi, and if you can imagine, it's very close to New Orleans. There's no winter weather down here. But that week we got a snowfall that was record breaking. And it was 9 inches. Beautiful, a beautiful sight. You can't see my
Wow.
window from here. My window is covered up to block the light. I was watching that snow and putting together the puzzle,
Hmm.
stained glass lion, and lo and behold, with all the work that God was doing in my heart and what this whole, time period of my life meant, sure enough, as the snow melted after it was 9 inches of snow here on the Mississippi coast, as the
Wow.
snow melted, stained glass lion shook his mane. And, he, he emerged from the puzzle and he's been there ever since. And,
Hmm.
you know, that's just a testimony I wanted to make known to you and others that the Lord has been faithful to me. I didn't anticipate the changes that
Hmm.
and the grief uh,
Yeah.
for my whole growing up in life that kind of hit me over these last few years. And a lot of it had to do with the trouble that came in 2020 to our country and to my sense of well-being in the world. Um, I was a new nurse, as you can see, you can imagine a brand new baby nurse at age 45, and the medical profession blows up, and I see death everywhere, and that was traumatic, and that wasn't really all that I've dealt with, but it's just been just a taste of it. As I said, my family's intact. I've got my friendships. I've got very much to be thankful for. But I have an active, and some would say an overactive imagination. Um, I don't deal with not knowing how to put the beauty that I see in the world um, into words, but yet I aspired as a pastor and preacher and writer to put things into words, but I felt like my my speech and my words have just been very few, and I knew not to over spend my whatever words I had to use because I didn't want them to be meaningless, and I really, I felt that my soul was in danger of too much speech.
Hmm.
There's so much that needs to be said, or at least so many things that people need to say. And so I feel like this is an unlocking, being able to tell my story, and I will start on that in more details with my family history. But being able to tell my story feels like a unlocking of something that's been frozen.
Hmm.
You know,
How did the how did the falling out of your relationship with your brother coincide with the end of your ministry and the beginning of your second career?
I was on the phone with my brother on October 31st of 2017. Have always been the best of friends, and I want to say that having a twin is a very special thing because when you're young, you always have a companion, a playmate, um, at all times. When you're in trouble, you have someone with you. When you're enjoying friendship and summer fun and whatever. So we enjoyed that. We even went to seminary together. We got married at different times. He got married a few years after I did. Um, but in 2017, we were carrying on this great relationship, and he was encouraging me in my frustrations with certain things in the ministry. He said, "Why don't you just get out and do something different for a change?" Um, and it was around that time I'd been thinking about it. But on the phone that day, I remember saying and deciding in my heart that I was going to do just that. And so that was 2017 Reformation Day, and I thought, well, that's a good day to get out of the church. We have had so many conversations, Brian and me, since we were in seminary together. We agree wholeheartedly that there's reform needed, and it's happening. Um, the reform we were longing for in the 90s in the church is underway right now. So what happened next was I had to decide what I was going to do instead of church work for income. And just I read a book called What Colors Your Parachute. I did a lot of praying. I've never been really good with big decisions. I had a hard time in college deciding on a major. I wound up majoring in biblical studies because I wanted to learn more about God and the Bible. And well, that's kind of why I went to seminary. And hey, since I had a degree, I thought I'd just maybe use it and get a church job. So as you can see, there's a lot of passivity or not knowing what I want. And I
Hmm.
don't want to make this a session for me to be psychoanalyzed, but I do that to myself all the time. So it is going to come out. Um, but whenever whenever I decided to become a nurse, I immediately got into my prerequisites. Spring of 18, I let my church know I was doing it. They agreed to have me on for full time for another year. Well, in 2018, we had to go part time for other reasons, but they let me stay part time because the church was small and was running out of funds. Um, so whenever 2019 came in 2020 and I graduated, it's very funny that you asked that question, Paul, because I was had just finished my boards in May of 2020 when I got a phone call from Brian, and I don't mind telling you the differences in our divide politically are going to be obvious, glaringly obvious eventually, I'm sure. But he called me one night and said, "What Trump has done today cannot be excused." I was like, "Well, whatever. What did he do?" Uh, and it was when he went down during the riots after George Floyd's murder and put the Bible up and said, "We're a country of law and order." It took a picture and had supposedly cleared the crowd with wasn't tear gas, I don't think, but it was smoke. So our country was in turmoil, but I was celebrating being and fixing to have a nursing job where I could start making money again, um, and starting a new work. Not sure what we were already in the middle of the COVID, staying in our homes, but I was going to be able to work because I was a worker that what do they call it,
Essential worker.
an essential worker. So I had that no problems there. So we started sort of arguing, you'd say, having more heated discussions around May of 2020, right when I was starting to nurse, right when I was starting to be a registered nurse. So as I moved into 2020, 2021, and then I was finding a lot of, I guess, an outlet for, I was finding mediocre news sources on the side, but what I longed for was conversation about life, and I found it in the
Mm.
corner of the internet. So as I tuned into this little corner and had conversations with my brother through 2021 after, and it really got a little worse after what was it, January 6th. And Brian is not necessarily a liberal. He just is against kind of conservatism he sees coming from evangelicalism through Trump.
Hmm.
Maybe it's through evangelicalism, but it's the Trump thing.
Yeah.
Um, he's got his reasons. Uh, but the coinciding was it's exact. I mean, me becoming a nurse also meant the country was falling apart, and my essential relationship, or most basic lifelong tissue memory relationship, was on. It never was a real falling out. We just had our ups and downs, and some times where we just quit talking for a few hours or days, and then just we'd come back and talk again and try to, we've been friends all along. I want to emphasize, but the differences and the way we approach knowledge and just arguments is we're so different.
Mm.
And so I grow frustrated, and I think he gets frustrated with me. I get frustrated with myself, and definitely with him because of his arguments and views. Um, but I'm wanting to work on how I communicate. And I think that's where this little corner can help me because I've got to come out of the lurk and stop just talking to him. He got on with Nate. In fact, he and I both got on with Nate for turned into 3 hours talking to Nate and Paul V. Axton. You know him? He's a Bible teacher who you might have read something from him because I think Brian sent you an article, but Nate Hiles on his channel too. They learn about theology. Um, so our approach to theology has been a lot different. So I guess I'd like to go ahead and start telling about some of my history.
Sure.
I want to watch the time too. I lose track. Um, I grew up in a story in a frame and in a house. And this house was my parents' relationship. I decided to be a little bit creative in how I try to tell this, but so you'll bear with me. Um, there's a picture of my parents when they were dating or had just started dating, even though they were high school sweethearts in a small town in Mississippi, or North Mississippi. My dad was a football player, my mom was a cheerleader, and they were high school sweethearts. But there was a time in college when they were both out of high school that they got more serious. And the surrounding that, the details were my mom called up my dad and or went to see him in town because she lived out in the country and said, I think we ought to date. Seriously date. And my dad came out to the house out in the country. And this sort of is a picture of their relationship. And what I'm saying is that I grew up in this. He had a pair of his pants that he wanted to hand to her and tell her to put them on in the driveway of their home, of her home. And he took a picture of her wearing his pants and they were laughing. He said, I'm giving you this moment to realize that I will wear the pants in my family. She had initiated the dating,
Yeah, yeah.
making it clear, but their relationship is good. They're still married to this day.
Mm,
They're both doing well, somewhat with some health problems on my dad's side, but their relationship is just as volatile, or I'd say vital, has vitality in it, but it's been volatile all along
mm,
and still has moments of that today. So that's the frame that I grew up in was
mm.
conflict. And I know children, I have three brothers, my twin brother, and I have an older brother, Scott, and a younger brother, Jeffrey. And everybody handles things differently. And that's what I'm seeing. I grew up in the same house with four boys, and we had a great time. Wonderful upbringing in the 80s. And there's a song by David Wilcox that says, it's called Forever Now. It says, um, love took a picture right here, right now. In my heart, I can see all those years shining through somehow. I see forever now. So the image of my parents having fun and also realizing they were going to have some headbutting. So we don't really see forever from here. We see through a glass darkly. And our parents are wonderful, but we've had some times of difficulty growing up, and I think I've internalized a lot of it. And I want to say I think Brian and me have carried on some of that vitality and the volatility, and just are trying. We're both, at least I feel like I'm trying to make peace with all of that. Um, and so, aside from politics, I don't think politics is as important as what we're talking about today, which is our secret, sacred self, the soul, what God is doing in each of us, because we can hide behind our intellectual conversations, and they're important to have, but they're really, it is possible to hide. And I think the soul is what I hear a lot about in the corner. Um, I see a lot of people insisting, hey, this isn't just thinking, talking. This is people. And so I want to get to my interest in C.S. Lewis because I think there's a special thing that is my sort of shtick that I want to emphasize and push and learn to communicate. But first, I'll finish, telling some of my story. But the intense feeling of loneliness kind of overwhelmed me at age 7. And it came at night when I was trying to go to sleep. Um,
You're gonna have to, you're just pretty soft.
um,
An intense feeling of loneliness came upon you when you were 7, late at night when you were trying to go to sleep. That's what I heard.
yeah, that's it. And so it shaped my inner life of trying to understand who I am and what I'm supposed to do and
Hmm.
where to fill that void. And
Hmm.
the old adage is you look for love in the wrong places,
Yeah.
and we do. But I had
So that's a distinct memory of yours.
absolutely,
Um,
and my brothers and I grew up in a Christian home, and we grew up in church. And sometimes it never dawned on me until I was 19 and in counseling that there's no real place for secrets. I mean, you don't keep secrets from the Lord. You don't keep secrets from His people. You don't hide things in shame. I think it just came out recently, yesterday, in fact, but Jonathan Pageau's new video about um, um, self-esteem. He was saying that Freud encouraged people to repress their inner life, um, but what what has become popular is just trying to find self-esteem by just being whoever you are in public and letting everybody deal with it.
yeah.
And it's turned into an indulgence in whatever I feel like I want right now. That's who I am, and so therefore I'm going to act out of that. And it just creates a huge mess for everybody.
Yeah.
But this my concern is that Christians really do need, as Jonathan Pageau really put it well in his talk, Christians don't hide from the truth. They see the temptation coming and they meet it head on. They don't try to act like it's not there. So when we look for love in the wrong places, we look for it in all these ways. And I was an upstanding, fine Christian young man in a church, and even in my family, looked up. I was sort of a hero, cast in that um, image. And then growing up, went to private school for 5 years, and then went to public school. Right when we switched to public schools in 6th grade, um, I was instantly, and my brother were both instantly popular because we had an older brother. I got elected somehow student council representative in my homeroom, and the same day was elected president. And I was president of the student body for 6 years after that.
Wow.
Brand new in public school, didn't know anything about leadership,
Yeah.
uh, sort of liked the attention, so I didn't mind getting voted in, but I actually did little or nothing to really represent that. And I felt a lot of shame as a result.
Hmm.
So I you know, feel that my standing with the world and who I am, I had a rough kind of start that wasn't obvious to everybody else. It was just only obvious to me, and I tended to want to continue playing that game even when I became a pastor because I'm definitely more of a wallflower than anything else. And if you want to be a pastor, especially in the Bible Belt, you don't usually pick a wallflower. You're usually, I mean, there's all different kinds of pastors, but I was actually trying to come out of my shell and be more outgoing.
Yeah.
But it's like I had to force it. And it
Yeah.
was sort of genuine, but it sort of wasn't. And
Yeah. Yeah.
um, it was a good thing for me to get out for a little while. I was actually planning on, after I got my nursing degree, planning on going back. But as you know, not only COVID broke things up, but the split with the United Methodist Church. And I could have gone back, but lo and behold, something happened. I became Orthodox. So it's all just mixed up.
Wow.
I have a very hard to categorize life and story, so I don't know how to tell it, but I was throwing that in because yeah, we became Orthodox this year, my wife and me both.
Wow. That is a big change.
So I'm not going back to Methodist preaching. That's my point.
Yeah.
But I
But
do.
the introvert, I had a one of my colleagues and friends, he's an introvert, and for a while he was doing quite a bit of wrestling with that. There was a book that was written, something about being an introvert in the ministry. There was also a time when the denomination, they wanted some tools to evaluate candidates, and so somebody had the big idea, well, let's run these tools on a whole bunch of seasoned pastors who sort of know themselves. And so I was voluntold for that, and that was fine. So I thought, oh yeah, I'll do all these tools, we'll see what I am. And so then you take all these batteries of tests and came back. You're an extrovert. It's like, oh yeah, that doesn't really surprise me too much. There've been points in my life when I've been more introverted and more extroverted. But one of the things that the counselor, whose main job is working with pastors, he said, yeah, extroversion and pastoring, they usually go together because it's such an intensive people vocation that while there are pastors who are introverts, there is then tension and struggling because you're always having to do something that you don't just feel natively comes easy. And it sounds, with your election and student body and all of that. So you were brought into roles that others saw in you, but that you were just didn't feel necessarily intuitively drawn to. And that'll take a toll. Is your brother as much of an introvert as you, or do you think he was more extroverted?
I think he's also introvert, but less so.
Okay.
He went to seminary too and never got into church work, but for a little while he did some youth ministry. And I went sort of straight into youth ministry full time. And then I went to pulpit ministry after 3 years,
Okay.
3 full years of ministry as a youth minister. I went into being a pastor in a church, and I was the sole. They had a piano player and a secretary, and they paid them, but I was the main guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, the extroverted part gave me, I had at least a 2.5 hour nap every Sunday afternoon. My stomach ache every Sunday morning. I couldn't, I couldn't eat breakfast. Stomach ache every day. I could recover throughout the week because actually pastoral ministry, visitation, 101, showing up at people's houses or in their lives for special events or difficult things was always fine for me. Even doing funerals, um, conducting worship was all not so bad. I didn't like the being a personality, and I also didn't like the way preaching made me feel. I never felt like my sermons were finished. When I gave them finished giving them, they were done. But that was all I could say was that that time for me preaching it has passed.
That's right. And there's going to be another one next week. So you're
So,
not going to polish it or refine it, or unless you decide you want to, be like how many pastors and write a book. So then they refine all their little sermons by the time they get out into the book. So yeah, yeah. What how long did you do pastoral ministry?
including my time as a youth minister full time, it was 18 full years.
Yeah, that's a long time. It's a long time.
In small rural congregations, and every time we moved to a whole new district, and there's only 11 districts in the state. So we skipped over 3 or 4 or 5 counties every time, and the last move was from North Mississippi to the very southern tip of Mississippi,
Wow.
like the coast. And my kids were becoming of age, so or teenagers. They were 10 and 12 when we moved here.
Yeah.
Like, well, if we move again, it's going to be. Well, if we basically, I'd say I'm not moving again after that.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So
So did you go to the same seminary as your brother? Were you in seminary together as well?
we went to Beeson Divinity School.
Okay.
Um, we were Baptist growing up, and when we went to seminary, we had both been in basically theology or philosophy. He was in philosophy. I was in more biblical studies for my degree.
Okay.
Degree was in, I think, something called general studies or interdisciplinary. And he was interested in theology and philosophy and went to seminary. And I chose Beeson also. It's a Baptist seminary, even though I had gone to kind of been influenced by the PCA school called Belhaven um, here in my home state. And got a good Bible degree, learned a lot about worldview and loved literature. And I took one philosophy class called aesthetics from the art department. I love that. And I loved history, but I didn't know what I was going to do with seminary except I wanted to figure one thing out, and it was my own experience psychologically and spiritually as a Christian. So I was determined to go to seminary after having gotten married and also gone through counseling in a sort of a secular counselor's office. Um, it helped me so much to be able to tell, where I've been and have someone reflect and listen and bless me as a person. That I wanted to do that. I wanted to be a chaplain in a hospital, which is what this guy was, or I wanted to be a counselor.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be secular. I wanted to be Christian.
Yeah.
My whole question was, and I wrote a big paper on this as my college, my senior year. A teacher took me under in a directed study, and the paper I wrote was, "What is the church supposed to be doing?"
Hmm.
Um, I had the question. I think I gave an answer in my paper, but I wasn't satisfied. I needed to go to seminary. I wanted to find out what I told the Lord. I, I felt like I was telling the Lord and myself that if I couldn't find some good integrity and authenticity in Christianity in seminary, that I probably would give up on church at least. And I didn't think I would lose my faith, but I had already lost it. I didn't know, what it meant to be a Christian, but I had something in me um, that was calling me forward, and I knew it was Christ. I knew it was a personal God. I just didn't know what to expect of myself or where He was. You know, he was seemed far away, but I had had some good experiences of knowing that the universe was a wonderful place. At seminary, I thought, well, if you can't find some answers there, where are you going to find them? So Beeson Divinity School is a Baptist denominational college at Sanford in Birmingham, Alabama, but it's not strictly Baptist, which to both Brian and me was a plus. It had chairs in other um, denominations, and it was conservative enough, but it wasn't staunchly Baptist and stuffy like we kind of grew up. And so we went to the same seminary. He had roommates. I had my wife. We actually lived close to one another and did life
Hang
together.
on.
Can you hear me? We did
All
life
right.
together.
You had Tiff, I don't have these. I don't hear. Um he had roommates, you had your wife. That's as far as I got. And I had to itch my ear.
I don't know if I'm trailing off too much, but I can try mine on.
All right, we'll see how those go.
Can you hear me okay
Yeah.
now? Oh, you can?
Well, I think it's still through the computer mic. I don't think it's through the headphones. You'd have to change the setting.
Okay. One more try.
Tap on that mic, see if it's picking up the mic. It's still, it's on the, you're picking up from the computer mic, not from the headphones. If you put the
Okay.
computer in your lap, well, I'll hear you better. Before you're showing me the room, I could hear you better. That's good. Yeah. It'll move around a little bit, but most people care more about the words than the visuals. So,
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
yep, yep, hear you good.
All right. I lost the screen. So what was I saying?
Well, you were in seminary. You were married. Your brother was not. He had roommates. You liked the seminary. It
And we,
wasn't. It was middle of the road enough. It wasn't. It was
yeah.
wasn't too hard lined.
Yeah, I guess my point in that is that saying that we did life together and learned together and had some common friends and certainly some common influences there. The Methodist chair was filled by a professor there who was very unconventional in his approach to theology. He worked in his art degree, which he had on top of a seminary degree, and encouraged pastors to um, basically explore the world of creation, the world of their own life, and the world of other people through art,
hmm,
and let that be the place where you go to learn how to interpret scripture.
hmm, it's interesting.
uh, he taught a class called um, early Christian spirituality too, which that class introduced me to the Eastern tradition and indirectly to the Greek Orthodox Church, which we're now part of here on the coast. But the time in seminary was special. Brian and me parted ways there. He went to back to Mississippi, and when I finally graduated, because I was about a semester behind him, because I had spent a whole semester, a whole year, in fact, in a hospital, being a chaplain doing CPE.
Yep.
That put me back. So I graduated later. When I finally graduated and got a job back in Mississippi, he was moving to, well, he was in Jackson for a little while, uh, but I was in a different part of the state. And then he moved to North Carolina and has lived in the Durham and Chapel Hill area all these years until recently moved to Charlotte.
Hmm.
Uh, but that's we've kept up online and on the phone since 2002. But we lived together pretty much on and off till then.
Yeah.
He went to Dallas Baptist University for his undergraduate, so we were separate for that time.
Hmm. Now
So
you mentioned. I mean, why do you think Trump has had such an outsized impact on so many people's lives?
that's a good question. I took it very lightly that I mean, I was amused, but let me back up. When I first saw him being put up with the other presidential candidates on the Republican during the primaries in 2016, I was concerned and I thought it was a joke. And I was thinking, this is not funny. But the more he talked and spoke, I was like, well, it's entertaining. Um, and then I realized he was going to win the primaries, but I voted against him. Um, well, that changes a lot when you won the primaries.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, what are we going to do? Well, he's saying some good things. He's got some good ideas. So I was taking it loosely. I wasn't as idealistic, thinking this man cannot be the president. I was kind of like, I mean, I didn't tell you my other political views, but I was pretty much, I had been reading Wendell Berry in 2000, and definitely by the time the trade centers came down, I was thinking this world is going to be destroyed, and we better learn how to take care of ourselves apart from technology and the lifestyle that we think is so indestructible. So Wendell Berry was not only a wonderful influence on me as far as the beauty of his vision for what life is in the agrarian world, but his um, understanding of of how basic life really can be and was for until the modern age was huge for me. Um, I thought, well, there's a vision for life, and it shaped my life till even in 2006, my family and me moved to the family farm where it's still in the family, but we lived there for 4 years because I wanted to learn how to take care of the farm and eventually, find another way of living other than grocery stores and gas powered engines. And even I wanted to raise animals. So I had this idealistic view of life. And I thought the United States government, especially after the fall of Wall Street, after the housing crisis, when the bubble popped in 2008, and then we propped everything up with TARP and money we didn't have. And I just thought, I don't know much, but I know this is fake. This is a bad situation. So things aren't looking good. So I didn't have much faith in the system. Um, I had been against the Iraq War in my heart and in my mind. I thought this is death for a sketchy political purpose in my own thinking back then. So I was not real optimistic about the Republican Party. I just had gotten in and I had voted Democratic in 2008 and not in 2012, but I was like, it could go either way. But Trump was just, to me, a surprise. And by 2020, I saw, well, he was a decent answer to what the problem was. But that's about the time my brother got really upset and wanted to talk about Trump and how he's just, an abomination. So I don't know how to say from, without misrepresenting him, maybe about how, I don't know what it is about Trump, but I just know that we are in unprecedented times and we're in clown world. I'm thankful to have that term. We have monsters. Not all monsters are just, as bad as others. So, the symbolic world references have really helped me make sense of things, but it hasn't helped me win very many accolades with my twin brother who wants me to defend why I would vote for Trump still, especially in 2020 or 2024. Um, but I'll just say, look, he's the better choice. That's all I can say,
Yeah.
and by far.
Yeah.
So he wants me to defend it, and I've heard some good arguments. I'm not good at crafting them and making them myself.
There are millions and millions of votes cast in America. He's living in he's maybe living in a purple state if he's in North Carolina.
Yeah,
Mississippi, Mississippi and California are both in states that our votes, there are fewer people in Mississippi, so your vote counts for a little bit more when it comes to presidential, um, electoral politics.
yeah,
Um, it's interesting to me the way regard works. And what's interesting about your story is that, I mean, a brotherhood, blood is thicker than water, but you're even identical twins. I mean, and anybody who's been around twins and especially identical twins knows that is a deep bond. That is a deep bond. And it's a bond that is often joyful, treasured, protected. They're, I mean, I assume your brother has a spouse too.
yeah,
Those are both special bonds, but the bond with an identical twin is such a unique bond. There's only one other person in all of human history that shares, your genetic material, shares your growing up. I mean, there's all these twin studies when they're, let's say, divided at birth and then they marry women with the same names and, drive the same cars, all these things.
yeah,
And to me, it speaks of questions of what constructs our world because neither of you to the best of my knowledge, have a personal relationship with Donald Trump. I
No.
mean, you don't get Christmas cards from him. I had a there was a it's kind of funny working with older people in the church because sometimes dementia comes in little by little. And I remember visiting this one guy and he had this obvious I think he had donated to um George and Laura Bush, and so had gotten a little thank you note with their picture on the front. And somehow, in this individual's mind, he was having a relationship with the Bush couple,
Yeah.
the president and the first lady. And I didn't make too much of it. I wasn't really gonna work on him to try to disavow him of the idea that the president had been sending and this, of course, in him went on, and he was explaining the Iraq War to me from different perspectives, and he had thought that the president had sent him messages, and this went on to a certain degree. I was in communication with his son um, because of, I was his pastor, and his son grew up in this church, et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't really feel a need to somehow disavow this elderly gentleman of the kind of relationship he thought he was having with the commander in chief of the United States, especially with respect to the Iraq War at the time. All that to say that the president of the United States, we vote for these individuals once every 4 years, and unless we're serving somehow in the government and or involved in some way, for the most part, that's the extent of the relationship we have with these people. While
Yeah.
obviously their policies make a difference, there's president, there's the Congress, there's the courts, there's state government, there's local government, there's county government. There's a lot of filters until things get down with us. And so what's interesting to me is you talked about volatility and vitality in terms of your parents' relationship. Um, the the personal quality of these relationships. And again, if you watch social media and pastorally, you'll listen to people. Um, I know in the Christian Reformed Church, some people for whom the fact that probably 70% of the Christian Reformed Church likely voted for Donald Trump, probably not in the primary. They maybe wanted Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz way back when, but these 70% of people usually vote Republican, and so they vote for who's ever on the ticket.
Yeah.
And yet, these knowledge that the other person has some different opinions with respect, some different ideas with respect to these people we watch on the screens and people who sit in chairs and buildings in Washington, D.C., that these things so disrupt our relationships with one another, even when there's so much history in these relationships.
Mm.
And, so I mean, when you came up to me at Midwestuary and started talking to me about this, I mean, I was so moved by that because, and actually, frankly, so disturbed by that. I
Mm.
mean, if you were to get into the particularities of my own political opinions, you know, if you would drill down far enough, it could be that, you know, I know I have disagreements with my wife with respect to politics. I know I have disagreements with my children with respect to politics. You know, I've got disagreements with my sister, with my mother, you know, I don't know if my father were alive, what he would think about all of this. I have some ideas, but it all seems just so tremendously abstract
Yeah.
and to shipwreck a relationship, or at least to put it in tension over a choice that we make every 4 years, along with 150 million or so other citizens of the United States, it always just seems outsized to me.
I think that word hits home for me, the abstract, because theology can be abstract.
Yeah,
Everything can be made abstract, and it is
yeah,
somewhere.
yeah,
What we don't want to do is be among the company that makes the most personal and the most important things abstract,
yeah,
and therefore miss the personal nature of them and miss each other,
yeah,
or make them, you know, an enemy when you should have an ally.
yeah,
And depending on, what war are we talking about here? Is it the war of the battle of the spirit, or is it some culture war that is still very abstract? If you look at it
yeah,
these terms, it's just
yeah,
um. So I think that's probably a lot of what Brian and me talk about and disagree on is how do you talk about these things and how important are they? How personal are they? And I think politics is personal, but Christianity is more personal. For Brian, politics and Christianity, or he calls it his political theology, is just as personal as anything else in theology, I think he would say. Um, so I think it's a personal, when I say personal, I mean close to his heart and my heart too, an idealism of trying to understand how to make a difference in the world by our speech or by persuasion.
yeah,
And so, you know, we know our country is in difficult times. I've always expected, even as a young child, I expected the end of the world to come.
mm,
That's something that didn't leave me in my 20s and my 30s. In fact, one of the reasons we moved to the farm is I thought the end of fossil fuel was coming.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And maybe the Lord would return, or maybe it would just be a total different world in the next, few months or years,
yeah,
what we have now. So I was thinking, yeah. But all along the way, I was also learning some really good theology from the sources that Brian and I share in from our training in seminary. One of them is Dr. James Houston, who is now retired, of course. He's 102. He lives in British Columbia, and he was the first president of the Regent College there on the campus of University of British Columbia. He came from Oxford, and he was a lecturer in Oxford, or maybe you'd call it a tutor. But anyway, he worked in the history of ideas, which was he lectured on geography, but it was basically the history of um, Europe in in the times of over the times of Western history. So he's studying ideas, and he became interested. Dr. Houston did in philosophy, and was a devout Christian and an evangelical, which there weren't many evangelicals during the 50s and 60s. Actually, yeah, probably 40s, 50s, and 60s at Oxford. But Dr. Houston came to Beeson Divinity School in his 70s and taught classes for us during the January term. And so his influence hooked me there. And I've been
mm,
listening to him talk and reading his works for all these years since the mid 90s, going back to his earliest teachings, which came in the 70s. The thing I want to say about him is his devotion to understanding theology as a um, very personal endeavor and the most personal. And we talk about here on the corner, you're mentioning just this past week that religion is the largest arena in which we can have these discussions, and why the TLC is so probably thriving and also so vitally important, because we don't stop before we get to the most core, central, and large arena that we can be in,
yeah,
is the theological or the religious. Well, Dr. Houston agrees with that, but he says that unless you're also making it more intensely personal,
yeah,
you're making it an abstraction and you're
yeah,
missing it. You could
yeah,
miss Christ for all your studies about Christ.
yeah,
Um, so I really have been enthralled with Jordan Peterson's nearness to Christianity. Um, but it's up against this man who really shaped my life and understanding of Christianity. It wasn't ever an abstraction for him. It wasn't ever a set of ideas.
Yeah.
It's a relationship with Christ.
Yeah.
But Dr. Houston um, has some. He didn't capitalize on this, but he knew personally C.S. Lewis, and not as a friend, but as a there in the 50s and in the mid 50s, I think they would meet and talk about whatever they were going to talk about. It was it was sort of like the corner. It was different denominations from Catholic to Orthodox to evangelical. And he was the only evangelical, but they were Anglican. That's C.S. Lewis was Anglican. And all these Christians were getting together to discuss things. And he was in the group. So he got an inside, he had his own perspective on C.S. Lewis. I would say that. And I'll just say this as an item of interest. When I was in Chicago, I stayed at Wheaton because I found a good Airbnb there. I got to wake up every morning and walk on campus. I'd never been there, but it just felt so epic to be on campus at Wheaton
Hmm.
in my walks before I came to um, the church for Midwestuary. But this C.S. Lewis, what's the name of the Wade Center?
Oh,
This
on Wheaton, this the C.S. Lewis library they have there. Yeah.
it's centered around the seven people, most of them Inklings, but
Yeah.
also including G.K. Chesterton. Um, there's a library there, and I went in looking for just to see what I could see. I wanted to see the wardrobe, and they don't let you take pictures and stuff, but I was just seeing what I could see. And I found out about this library. I went in the back, and they were telling me they had letters, copies of letters that C.S. Lewis had written. And I remember Dr. Houston saying so many things about C.S. Lewis and giving some talks on him. I said, "Do y'all have anything about Jim Houston in this library?" And lo and behold, they had an interview that was just done a few years ago of someone asking Dr. Houston about his experience with C.S. Lewis. And I had heard some of him talking about it before, so none of it was super enlightening or new. But the thing that Dr. Houston wanted to do was not capitalize on what he called the industry of C.S. Lewis.
Hmm.
I appreciated that. That's what we call it, Big Eva, or
Yeah.
uh, you have another word for evangelicalism that's a market. I can't remember what you.
Yeah. I usually say it's a marketplace rather than
Well,
it's
I
rather
my
than
understanding of
ecclesia.
evangelicalism is shaped by the integrity with which it's been presented to me, as Dr. Houston taught about the full 2,000 years of church history, and gave lectures on people like Augustine or um, Bernard of Clairvaux or Jonathan Edwards, from all these places in church history, and he sort of focused on their personal lives and their culture, what kind of things were going on around them, why were they like they were. And he even they did a book called Sources of the Christian Self that came out of Regent a few years back, and Dr. Houston edited it. You'll recognize some of the theologians in that book, I'm sure, if you to look at it. But the thesis is, or the idea was to get all the theologians at that school to write about their favorite character from church history influence, and to put it in the cultural, personal context of why these people were the way they were. And what it did was like it created a, um, a bucket full of jewels that, when dumped out on the floor, catch the sunlight. Each person in that book is a jewel because they're unique, different color, different shape, but reflecting the same light. And I think that's what my understanding of evangelicalism has been shaped by, is that there's a spirit of personalness that evangelicalism at its best represented during the times of Wesley and other times as evangelicalism came to the fore, and especially with people like Richard Baxter and the Puritans who were so devout. Yeah, they started the religious wars, but there were some very, I mean, Richard Baxter, for instance, wanted to be a mere Christian.
Yep.
And that's
Yep.
C.S. Lewis got the term.
Yep. Yep.
And these are things you pick up when you're listening to Dr. Houston talk. And what he's doing is he's chiseling away at your at our political um, assumptions about politics. Now he'd be the first one to say, you know, we're going to bury evangelicalism with book sales, and it will be gone because we're trying to make it big again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I know that there's a critique to be had of evangelicalism, but here I am, an Orthodox person. I chose this cross instead of the Orthodox cross because I'm really still Protestant, or maybe I'm really still um, evangelical in my heart. I want to be a mere Christian. I was thankful to become Orthodox, but it's not like I found something that everybody else needs to find right now. I don't take that line, but um, what Dr. Houston taught as he looked into other, he was more of a he was pretty much a inter interdisciplinary self-taught person. Um, he studied psychology. He talked about the Myers-Briggs, but he talked about the seven deadly sins or the eight evil passions, personality. How is it that your personality is transformed? He said Christ will individuate you like no one else can.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to
Yeah.
be a person. You want to be an individual, unique person. The evangelicals of the 1700s or the during Wesley's time saw that the the soul or the person was unique. No, that the person was precious. But if we are Trinitarian in today's world, post Freud, we see that every soul is unique and infinitely so. So there's so much to explore. I think that's what I see so beautifully in the corners that you have randos with people who are randos. Well,
Welcome to the club.
I don't know what my story means, but I'm trying to figure it out because I know Christ is calling my name.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's so much mystery in my own life. Um, I don't want to be preoccupied with myself. I've got family. I've got
Yeah.
a calling to make a difference and maybe give back some of what's been given to me
Yeah.
in what it takes. Dr. Houston's one of his phrases that he learned from Africa of all places. He's done a lot of world travel. He said, "There's an old saying from this tribe in Africa, and I don't want to say which tribe because I'll get it wrong, but it takes knowing a person to become a person." Well, how many people that we talk to are persons, and how many people to whom we talk are we representing Christ as a person, or are we ideologues, or are we mere voters, or are we mere part of a voters block, or um, not to lean too much on the political side, we could also just be totally abstracting and missing. We're just in our heads and we're not in our bodies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Relationships are something you I love um, Bonhoeffer's Life Together. He says in there in that book that just to have a brother sitting next to you, a brother in Christ, is the most wonderful gift that you can receive. Be glad when you get it because there will may be a time when you don't get it every week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so I think the corner is very aware of what I'm saying right now. But we give thanks that there's ways to connect through the dialogue of the logos and via the internet. It's amazing. I would have, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, for sure, I would have protested and said, you can't do anything meaningful on technology. Um, I've been converted. Now I know better. Um, my own personal relationships in my family, and then I never had many roots moving around as much as I have as a
Mm,
professional. But the relationships I do um, have suffered because in the year 2012, I finally gave in and got a smartphone. And I had a computer in my pocket, and it took the place of me doing and being a certain way.
mm,
I've grieved that. I feel like that's what, because one of the biggest hangups that I'm struggling with even today is the grief over having handed one of these devices to my children when they were 15
mm,
and what it did to our family.
yeah.
Um, and I don't want to say I don't want it to sound as if things went totally off the rails. They were just subtle enough for me to know we live in we live in a volatile, like that word keeps coming up, a subtly spiritually dangerous time.
Yeah.
And I, I don't, I don't really keep up with or develop arguments or ideas in my head. They all jumbled together. But I know I heard recently someone in the corner, or maybe it was at Midwestuary, talking about probably John Vervaeke. What is it to be human? Um, I think this image of God in Genesis 1:26 holds the answer to that. But what does that mean? It's relational, and if a computer and a phone can serve it, fine. But if it takes away from it, what to do then?
Yeah.
Put the first things first. Make sure you don't abstract everything. Make sure you don't become um, addicted to the algo, to whatever it's serving up. It's getting worse and worse. It's going to be more and more um, debilitating to our communities unless we do. I think we do have to be in the Benedict order somehow. Figure out what that means. Um, the prayer life, the prayer life is the heart of this discipleship. It's not just having answers and being able to talk about it. It's knowing how to live it. So when Christianity to me is presented to me as you know a set of abstractions, I lose interest quickly.
Mhm.
Although I engage in it readily enough, and probably definitely more than I should. But even when we do that, we're looking for we read to know we're not alone. We're looking for some kind of connection when we're debating propositions. But where's the heart of the faith? I believe Dr. Houston had a gift and a calling and a prophetic ministry that he did for decades, and I've gleaned from it. But I've been a lurker, Paul. I want to come out of my shy um, frustration and learn to be what is to take the risk. Um, I started out in youth ministry, and I wanted to help kids avoid some of the things I experienced in the church, particularly, but just in life. I wanted to be an encouraging presence in the kids' lives, teenagers' lives. I had I had no kids when I became a youth minister. Eventually, I had my own kids, and I became a youth minister again when they were younger. But then I went back to pastoring, and I looked out at my congregation in 2015, And I may have heard this somewhere, but I realized secularism was on the move, and like Keller called it programmatic. I could see it affecting my psyche, and I had this cell phone issue. I was like, "What's happening to my kids?" This was 10 years ago now. I started thinking, "What's happening to my kids and my how do I help avoid secularization flooding my church?" But not only that, are my kids going to wind up Christian? I don't know. I hope so. That's my whole desire, is to pass on the faith.
Yeah.
That's why I got out of church. That's why I got out of ministry. I felt like I didn't want to focus any longer, especially if a move was going to come, and lose connection, or the ability to disciple my own children. But it was so difficult, even after I got out of nursing school and 2020 and beyond had occurred. My attention was so divided. My kids were so, probably traumatized by the changes in the world. And, I just, I'm trying to put my life back together now. But before 2020 and before 2017, when I left ministry or began to, I have had a very just palpable hope. And it's like God has allowed that to be reformed and reshaped, and even damaged somehow, for it to rise again now. And I'm thankful I have integrity of relationship with my family. I still have a standing in the community, but my heart is, and my imagination is still where the 7-year-old child was. But
Mm,
we're staring into the abyss.
mm, mm.
I love I love this, and I know that Nietzsche said you have to stare into the abyss, and I didn't hear that because I read Nietzsche. I just heard it from someone who had. But I think it also, when Peterson may have said this, but Nietzsche said, if you stare into the abyss long enough, you just don't want to become, what did he say? The
The
monster
abyss stares back at you.
comes back at you, and you may become it. Or so there's the implication is that you may become the monster that's in there. So be careful. You are a monster, according to Peterson. You have the potential of doing whatever is the greatest evil in your circle of life that you can do. Watch out. But the abyss is to be reckoned with. Well, Dr. Houston takes these teachings from Nietzsche or whoever, and the philosophers, and lines them up with evangelical faith and says, look, when you're a Christian, you have to do like Kierkegaard. Um, well, maybe Kierkegaard said some of this. I'm not sure, but you basically have to stare into the abyss. But if you look long enough, you'll see Christ. You will see Christ because He went there. It's faith. It's faith that transforms the world. That transforms our hearts and therefore the world. Transforms the world for each unique person. It's faith. And there's no other name given to man by which we can be saved. So I do believe cultural, and this will get me into trouble here. Christianity is a cultural force, but it's not only that. We we kind of need to deal with what it is to be Christians in a world that's called liberal, but we also don't need to act as if the world is going to be okay without Christians being pretty fundamentalistic, if you allow me to say that. I mean, that's just off the conversations from Midwestuary. I don't know what all that might mean in the hearing of you
Yeah.
and others and say it, but faith is in Christ. And Christ is with us. He's right here. He's flesh and blood. And I've experienced him that way, but I've lived in fear that I've lived apart from the boldness that it takes to come out of the lurk. And I knew from the time I was 15 years old that I wanted to be a bold Christian. I
Hmm.
just knew. And I think I've thought being a youth minister or going to seminary or being a pastor would just pull it out of me and it would happen.
Hmm.
Um,
What does
you know,
being a bold Christian look like to you?
um, not being ashamed or unwilling to do the right thing, even if no one else does it. Or,
Hmm. Hmm.
that's the hero. That's the hero thing where I told you that's sort of been my assumptions. Like I would be the only one.
Yeah.
No, the corner begs to differ.
Yeah.
My own family, my you have to go out, um, take risks and kind of how the adventurous spirit that I had to take on in order to go through nursing school.
Yeah. 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 That's a significant
But I held it
move
light.
in your 40s.
Yeah, it certainly was, and it was difficult cognitively, um, I would say, but it was a challenge, and it gave me gave me some rigor in which I could perform to realize I could do more than I thought.
Yeah.
That was the value of it. Besides, it gave me a way to earn money over the next however many years I use it,
Yeah.
and I hope to use it part time from now on. But um, I, I've felt part of my frustration is I really desire to be in some kind of I really don't want to say it because it's it's part of the desire for that I would be able to share language and or share life through language with other people. But it's not that necessarily want to have a career in that. I just want it to happen. But when I felt like my lips were sealed after leaving the pulpit ministry, and my kids and me could only hug goodnight or you know eat a meal together, but the conversation wasn't flowing, and my wife and me were praying fervently for our children some nights, wondering what would happen the next week or even that night with them. We were we were keeping the flame alive, but I want to share the fire. I want to share it with others. I want to come out of the lurk and be a more, I guess, extroverted person. Is that wrong to say?
No, well, the a theme running through this. So you talked about a hero, and often the hero is it's sort of an archetype of a solitary individual over and against a group or the mass or something. And that's okay, that's that. But, this whole thing got going because you have felt one way or another a degree of estrangement from a twin. I mean,
Yes.
that's not nothing. That's a tremendous thing. And speaking now about the desire, I mean, again, it's a desire for communion, it's a desire for home. I mean, there's a degree of domicide in your story.
Yes.
The because if there's anything that, for many people, it's located in their marriage because again, a husband and wife make a home, children. It's a very powerful thing. But it's our marriages aren't the only homes that we inhabit. We, of course, inhabit our home of origin. And again, talking about, it's a you have a really I could see why you had the vocation, had a pulpit vocation, because you do have a gift of expressing yourself in evocative images, and the fact that you selected that picture of your father and mother and the pants story, and
Yeah.
then the image of both vital and volatile. I mean, that's a very powerful pairing, putting those two things together. And
Mhm.
it's not, it's the opposite of a dead marriage.
Yeah.
Some people wish their marriages were more peaceful, but some marriages that are peaceful are not vital.
Yeah.
And, you cannot have a close relationship and a vital relationship without the possibility and threat of volatility. And, it seems to a degree that's part of what has happened with your brother. You've certainly had a vital relationship with your brother, and now there's volatility in that relationship. And these aren't opposites,
Mhm.
but there are tensions in there. And, I hear as you talk about your desires for your life and what your heart desires, I hear, we all, in a sense, want two things that are in some ways at odds with each other. We want security and we want adventure. And adventure is in some ways antithetical to security. You cannot have them both. And even though in some ways the Christian life and the gospel attempts to square that circle, where you have, so last week I preached on Jacob, and
Sweet.
Jacob and Esau are interesting in that Esau is of the field, and so the adventure, going out, the hunt, and Jacob prefers the tents and the home. And but Jacob, once he flees Esau, because his mother says he's going to take your life,
Right.
and I couldn't bear losing, both of you, because how could I maintain my relationship with my son Esau, knowing that he is the murderer of my beloved son Jacob? And so Jacob flees. Jacob goes off to his adventures, and the Lord comes to Jacob at Bethel and gives him just an unconditional promise of blessing and security. And Jacob's response to that is turning it into conditionality, which is a telling turn of a gift. And so, in some ways, Christianity tries to give us both, give us ultimate security in
Mhm.
that our relationship with God is not a function of the strength of our grip on Him, but rather the strength of His grip on us. But also, you mentioned Bonhoeffer, also this absolute demand that comes to us to, take up our crosses and stop grasping to try to secure our lives. I mean, both of these things come into discipleship.
Yeah.
And in almost every relationship, every meaningful, close, bonded relationship in this world, we navigate those tensions, because once you have a relationship that is as primordial and genetic and foundational as that of, let's say, an identical twin, we have other similar relationships, parental bonds, spousal bonds, two becoming one flesh. We have these deeply powerful relationships, but they always, with that power, also come with the threat of volatility and rupture.
mm,
And and it's all of those tensions that make those relationships so utterly foundational. And the same with our children. We and Peterson put it nicely with the image of the Pieta, where you have Mary holding the broken body of her son. And of course that's in scripture as well, with um the the magi coming, and the notice of the angel that blessed are you above women, because you have been given the privilege of bearing this son. But this son is going to come, this privilege is going to come at a tremendous price, a tremendous cost, in that almost every mother's worst nightmare is seeing the death of a child,
yeah,
because every good mother wants their children to surpass them, not only in various measures that we use amongst each other, but even just in terms of their life themselves. Every parent wants to be buried by their children and not the other way around. And so, your trauma, your trial, the longing of your heart is the longing of all of our hearts, that we live in secure communion, that we live in a secure home, that we live in secure fellowship. Um, there's this Christian song, this evangelical song, I don't know where it came from. Bind us together with cords that cannot be broken, bind us together with love. But in the age of decay, these communions are subject to, that they're subject to other powerful forces. And I think you nicely spoke about the fact that, yes, Trump is in some ways theoretical and distant, but you're exactly right. So is our faith. And we are inhabitors of imaginaries that are absolutely necessary for us. We are not animals. We live in we live in a realm that has a heaven, and we live in a realm that has powerful bonds and ties. Last week's Friday live stream, I thought, I thought it was so beautifully brought up by Alex, that on one hand, we need food every day, and we know that viscerally, and we recognize that if we are deprived of food, we within short order we visibly watch each other diminish and then perish for lack of just this very animal process of taking in a living thing, consuming it, and digesting it.
mm,
But we humans also require love, and without that love, maybe not on the same time span, but without that love, we also die. It is as essential. Jesus says to the devil, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And so, and
mm,
and here in this world, we live between these poles. And as I before was preaching on the fall, that story in Genesis 3 and those curses, as you wind up preaching on the same passages over and over sometimes, so you revisit these texts. And one of the things that struck me this time as I was going through Genesis 3 again is, to Adam, it's eating, eating, eating. You ate from the tree. You must eat, but the ground will fight you for
mm,
that food that you need.
yeah,
And in this world, things come at us. Every marriage has this. Every
mhm,
parent-child relationship has this. Every sibling relationship has this. No matter how close, things come at us to separate us, and of course, it makes me think of Romans 8. Nothing, no height, no depth can separate us from the love of Christ Jesus. But yet, that love of Christ Jesus for us human physical creatures is so often necessarily mediated by each other. And so in the love of your brother, Christ flows through that love. In the love of a father or a mother to a child, Christ flows through that love. In the love between spouses, Christ flows through that love. And so
Mm.
and so again, here we have this, and again, one of my favorite quotes from Lewis from The Problem of Pain, where he wrestles with the question of pain in this world, that we long for unshakable stability.
Mm.
And Lewis says the world doesn't offer that to us. It gives us plenty of pleasure, fleeting happiness, a good meal, a fun sports game, a great evening with your spouse. But when you sign up for marriage, you don't always recognize that the heights to which you can enjoy um, communion with your spouse will likely also be, in almost every case, there's some people seem to have golden relationships, but
Mm.
in almost every case, also, you know,
Mm.
depths of pain like you never want to know.
Mm.
And these proportions are never given out, fairly to people.
Mm.
And so, when I listen to you, when I listen to you process and talk, I hear those themes coming through
Mm.
that, I don't think anyone, I mean, I'm not a twin, but just knowing what I know, even about, let's say, the wounds that even adoption, a mother cannot, for whatever reason, raise this child. And so she gives this child to a stranger to raise. you
Mm.
know, Psychologists look at that and say there's actually a wound that happens
Right.
because we don't start at the moment that we pass through that birth canal. And at an astoundingly early form of your development, in ways that are not conscious or likely able to be articulated, are bound to that individual like I will never know,
Mhm.
because I was alone in the womb. Now my mother was with me, and the voice of my father filtered through, it filtered through the womb.
Yeah.
And, obviously over years, other aspects of my parents came into me as well, my siblings and my wife and my children and my friends and churches. So, and then to have, I'll just say it this way, and I try to say it in as impartial a way as possible, to have, in a sense, another spirit divide what was there long before you were even born, at least long in terms of the time of a fetus, telling time to the degree that they do or can. So,
Mm.
and obviously what that means for us who inhabit this story of, you know, I knit you together in your mother's womb. I knew you, before your parents could lay eyes on you.
Well, I think that's to answer your question maybe more pointedly. That's what I mean by being bold. I
Yeah.
want to be the person that God intended and and blessed from day one
Mm,
to be for me to be. And
mm,
that's going to require a lot of faith, trust, and risk taking, exploration, patience, forgiveness, it's going to require help from, you know, I've been asking coworkers in their 20s to teach me how to do things because they've been doing it longer than me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And, you know, I'm not ashamed to ask for help.
yeah,
It's been a blessing to me to have relationships with people that don't look up to me. They look up to me, I'm sure, as an elder, a older person in the hospital as a nurse, but I wasn't their pastor, and most of them don't even necessarily care. Well, we got a lot of Christians down here, but we have a lot of. Hey, I'll just put it this way: I have changed the culture by getting out of the church and moving into the hospital, and I've been blessed by the quality of the people I meet there.
yeah,
And it's not their language that I'm talking about;
yeah,
it's the way they talk to each other, though. It
yeah,
is their language. But
yeah,
I remember in nursing school, here's the preacher in nursing school, and I heard the F bomb everywhere I went in nursing school. I thought, when we're in the hospital, it's kind of unprofessional to say that. So I went to the teacher and said, probably shouldn't, should you say something about the professionalism of our language? And she just shrugged and laughed and said, there's a lot more in nursing you got to get over before you can be a good nurse, and that's one of them. So, in other words, my Bible Belt want to clean up your language push was going to get me in trouble. Um, and I'm talking about something that happened 7 years ago while I was in nursing school. I've gotten more colorful language since then myself. But at the time, I've just learned to see people differently. And these people that I'm learning to get help from have, I mean, it's been very enriching. I enjoyed my time in the church for similar reasons. It's enriching to be, and it's a blessing to be ushered into the heart of a community when you just get there with a moving truck and to be allowed that
yes,
privilege.
yes,
That's something that no one else understands, I guess, if you've not been a pastor. But I
yeah,
was the key to the city wherever I
yeah,
went as
yeah,
a pastor, and it's not something I took lightly, and I was blessed by it in so many uh, ways. I just have to learn to be myself in that, knowing what I know now from my time as a pastor, whether I'm ever in such a position again or not. I just know that God's calling me not to be a pastor, but to be Brad. And he even has, as Luke reminds us, a white stone name for each of us if we're faithful to the end that we don't even know yet. I don't know who I am. I
mm,
don't know what it means for me to follow um, whatever desire God will not let me let go of.
mm,
And how do you discern those from the ones that you should let go of that you don't want to, but God wants you to? I mean,
yeah,
it's like you said earlier, there's paradoxes in this life and in these relationships. There's both sides of a coin. You got to learn to let go and hold on with all your might, to be bold and be meek. Um, so I guess in my post ministry years, it's just been very intense, and I'm thankful that I've had the corner there to be a mirror,
mm,
let me see others being learning to be themselves and be vulnerable and take risks and tell their stories. And some of us in our introverted states or characteristics, we don't really want to call in on the live streams, but we sure get a lot of. Um, we eagerly watch.
mm,
And I went when I mentioned this Symbolic World Summit. I really wanted to say a word or two to Jordan Peterson when I was there. and I wanted to say a word or two to Jonathan Pajot, but I didn't know what to say because I feel like my tongue was just I didn't have anything that I knew I wanted to say, but thank you or I'm your greatest fan or something like that. So number one, it was hard to get to Jordan Peterson at all. But I realized quickly that my mission there was to come out of the lurk by speaking to other people that were sitting next to me in the seats.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a little, this I'm going to say this because I don't know if Nathan remembers, but Nathan Filbert, who you just had a rando with and released, he I remembered when I saw his face there that he was someone I talked to at the Symbolic World Summit. He had the bookstore there, and had a group of guys that I was trying to email, and we emailed back and forth for about a week or two after Symbolic World Summit.
Hmm.
I'm glad I tried that, but I also learned a valuable lesson. You're going to meet people when you get out of the lurk, and they're precious and they're unique, but it's a whole new thing to maintain these relationships or to spearhead a movement or you know you were not in charge of some of this, but we also have to act to see what the spirit wants to move
Yeah. Yeah.
to to make something come to life that we're not expecting, kind of like has happened with the corner. You
Yeah.
just started making videos and you followed steps, and it's become a blessing to many of us on the fringe. And I don't know how many people with my personality are, or my. I mentioned David Wilcox a while ago. He's a songwriter. He's a, he's a, I think you'd call him a brother. Always calls him something mystic. But anyway, secular mystic.
Hmm.
Anyway, his songs are really meaningful. But he's one phrase in one of his songs is, "I saw your soul when you dropped your fear."
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
That's something that you know is true. We have to be willing to let our guard down and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I preach that a lot, but I
Yeah.
don't know how well I've lived it.
Hmm.
There's new. I mean, every day is new. Every season of life is new.
Yeah.
I knew I couldn't go forward. Like I made sure that, and I didn't tell you this, but I made some videos in February of this year before I became Orthodox. It just happened to coincide with that. But I woke up one day and felt like I got to come out of the lurk. I'm gonna make a video. And what I tried to do was make a video, and it was 20 minutes of me talking, just kind of like I have today, but much more pointed and specific.
Hmm.
And I put them on my YouTube channel, and I thought, how does this work? Guess how many views did I got? None. So
No, no, if nobody knows about it, it's
I like, what do you do? I put a title on it, and I thought the algo is going to serve it to somebody. Let's just see what happens. Well, I made four videos, 20, 20, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, and 10 minutes. I knew I should get shorter, not longer. But anyway, it's me dealing with my feeling of stuckness. It had nothing to do with my brother.
uh-huh.
Dealing with the angst of being a nurse, but having a pastor's heart
Huh.
or something like
Oh, yeah.
that. And I was saying to the people, to the screen, whatever I was going through, I was like, why am I doing this? But I just felt like I had to.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I get it.
I'm showing it to somebody, and a local friend who's trustworthy, but evidently the next 2 weeks he had didn't involve him watching the videos. He was going to get to it.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was like, okay, well, that was a good chance. And I go back and watch them sometimes. I think, well, that's what was going on with me that day. And it sounds like
Yeah. Yeah.
someone else could benefit from. But I don't know how this works,
Well, that's
but
exactly what I expected to happen because I had been putting videos out on YouTube, The Freddie and Paul Show, and we had 10 or 15 views. And I was pretty certain that between Nancy and Freddie, that was the 10 or 15 views that we had. And so I made a video. I didn't really expect hardly anybody to watch it. And then it was just the way the algorithm at that time worked. And then it just things happened. And
the Jordan Peterson interest
yeah.
was a
And it was that is at that moment during what was going on with, and it's whatever, but it's to make a video and have nobody find it is pretty normal, unless again, and that's sort of what has developed in that if um I mean part of what I've seen develop is that people will make things that other people will watch and talk about because there's this question of mattering
right, right.
as
And I
if you're known.
didn't
So,
want whatever I was saying. I kind of didn't want it to be viewed by just anybody. I thought,
yeah.
well, maybe it'll help somebody and it'll put out a fleece, like kind of thing, help me feel like if there's anything good that comes out of it, I'll know what to do next, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Well, Christian Baxter will probably find you because he's a nurse, and then you two will have he's nurse and so we have two people who both nurses and pastors in the corner, and it's
I
an
met
it.
him at Midwestuary and told him thank you because I deeply appreciated his covering of the ARC conference.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were a big part of that too, but I watched his channel pretty much start to finish on his trip. Um, and it meant a lot to me. I'll tell him thank you for that. So we made that connection. I told him I had heard recently that he was a nurse, which was kind of
Yeah.
a new, except that he mentioned it one day.
Well, where should we take this next? Should I have a conversation with your brother and then have a conversation the three of us? Is that kind of what we should do, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think that would be a good way to do it. And I appreciate it if you would, because Brian has wanted to be. He's sort of like me, sort of a lot different. But at the same time, I think he wants to talk to you, have a randos, but I don't know if the emphasis will be for him on personal journey.
Yeah.
As I'm the one of the two of us that tends to lean in that direction. He's got a lot of thoughts and ideas and questions and challenges of I don't know how quickly he'll try to move towards that, but I know that I think what you said is we get to know, you guys get to know the Sarter twins, and
Yeah.
then we get together and have a video where the two of us get together and
Yeah.
make sense or make peace, um, make a peaceful future possible or whatever. But I think it will resolve itself in not answers about political theology necessarily, though I hope Brian feels satisfied in that way. But I feel like it will resolve itself as the two of us realize we're part of a very beautiful tapestry of people and stories that God is doing from day one in creation. And whatever it is and whatever it means, we have a part to play in it, small as it may be. And we're not to be isolated texting arguments about Trump for eternity. Because I'm telling you, Paul, I have felt like there have been times that have, whether I'm talking to my brother or whether it's just me in my life these last few days, I thought, and I know you know Lewis's work, but I was becoming a grumble. Like, I don't want to spend eternity being a grumble. I want to be a person. I want to follow higher up, further in, deeper. And if it means taking a risk of whatever kind, let's get this show on the road. My brother and me we have a lot of common views, but this we just I think this volatility and vitality is just deep in our tissue, and we got to make peace with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I hope so. Like when you talked to me at Midwestuary, I thought I'm down for this because I actually think that in a way you're both offering yourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, every day, whether it's CRC Voices or, I see how many, I see relationships torn by this current political moment. And I think people would love to heal it. I don't know. I don't see those kinds of tensions as necessarily destructive
Hmm.
because I tend to see these things that come up as potentially productive in that almost everything that annoys me says something about me because
Yeah.
I'm the one getting annoyed.
Yeah.
And so, what does that say about me? And then I have to exercise agency because the instinctive thing that I do is, text back or respond back or hit back. And there's so much of what's going on in the culture is just this automatic back and forth.
Yeah.
And that there's a severe lack of agency there because when Jesus says turn the other cheek, that takes a tremendous amount of agency rather than, just this.
Yeah.
And so if one person is doing this, it actually takes a good bit of agency and strength to, because at some point the other person's going to, because doing this feeds on itself.
Hmm.
And at some point, if you actually don't like this pattern, well, step out of it. And
Right.
then maybe the other person's wrist is going to get a little tired. And maybe they'll stop and say, "Well, why aren't you hitting back?" "Well, I don't want to hit you. You're my friend."
Yeah.
"Okay, well, these things, what about? These things are important." "Yeah, I agree they're important." "Well, I think these things." "Oh, I hear you. You think those things." "Well, what
Yeah.
do you think?" "Well, I might see some things differently, but I think about you more than I think about those things you're pointing to
Right.
because most of those things you're pointing to, you were both old enough to remember what people thought about 20 years ago. And there might be some connections with what people thought about 20 years ago now, but there's also a lot of differences. I mean, I remember on CRC Voices when the Al Gore George W. Bush presidential election, I thought that was going to tear everything up. And I think people look back now and they're kind of like, well, that wasn't so bad. Okay. So maybe we can have a little bit more agency in us to say, all right, well, sure we can talk about Gaza or ICE um or Charlie Kirk or whatever sort of blowing us up right now. Or maybe we can say, well, maybe we won't talk about Charlie Kirk today. Maybe we'll talk about him a month or two from now when because none of us know what Charlie Kirk's going to mean 2 months from now.
Right.
So then to just have more agency in the mix where we can, because what really matters,
Yeah.
you see this all the time too. When you spouses that are in an unhappy marriage, you watch those two just go at it, and it's like,
Like,
are you two having fun with this? Because sure don't seem like you're having fun.
mm,
So anyway, that's what I see. And when I mean I get triggered just like everybody else, and then somebody'll type something on a private chat or Twitter doesn't bother me because it's just Twitter. It should be fun. But in a family thing, and I'll have to ask myself, okay, what I instinctively want to say is this. But I pretty much know if I say this, they'll say this.
yeah.
So let me play around and I'll say this. And they might keep doing this, but sometimes they'll be like, and to me, this just gets boring after a while.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
and so I
we're,
don't know.
we're plumbing the depths of theology and philosophy that as far as I mean, my depth doesn't go very low with some of the subjects, but we kind of think of ourselves not as maybe scholars or intellectuals would be too strong of a word, but we love to think about big things.
Of course, yeah,
So
yeah,
we're also testing out our ideas on each other and
yeah,
this and that. So it's
and
like
it should be fun.
it's fun. A lot of it is playing the game
Yep.
of it's not that we're just fighting or beating our heads against the wall. It's just that I'm realizing how my emphasis I want my emphasis to be on other things rather than say Hegel's, you know, philosophy about, you know, antinomies and things that I don't really understand that. So let's, I'm trying to, I don't know, I like to bring it down to personal stuff, and it's all personal. But me and Brian have, you know, we're just trying to figure out a language. We're trying to figure out a new language that's more inclusive of other people, that's
Yeah.
more hospitable.
Yeah.
I think that's the cry of his heart too. He's been on channels with in talks with Nate, and I think he and Nate have sort of connected and communicated, but I'm not real sure each of them knows what the other is saying at some of the times. And that's concern. And that sounds condescending, but I really don't. Maybe it's just showing that I don't understand the subject matter. But I
Well,
also think,
but you also understand your brother better than Nate ever will.
true,
So you can read him like nobody else.
but I also get lost trying to understand some of his arguments. And that's what I'm trying
Oh,
to, this whole thing I'm framing in a challenge to my brother.
okay.
Call it a duel.
A duel.
You don't
A
like it.
duel.
But duel is to help you maintain your honor. It's to settle a score, to make sure that you're not continuing something indefinitely that's going to get deteriorate. But you need to settle this.
All
And it's
right.
not
All right.
violence. You know, I'm not advocating violence. I'm just advocating clarity.
Okay.
And he and I can, coming out of the lurk, maybe have some. I think we'll maintain the humor that's in my parents' relationship. We've been given that honestly, but the vitality is going to be proven to be more. Uh, it's going to win the day.
Okay. All right. That's a good word. I will we will endeavor to see if Brian is up to this challenge too, and I'll have a conversation with him, and then at some point the three of us will talk.
You
And
have his email address on my original email. Do you want me to let you
I'll
handle?
find it. I'll find it. I can search your email, no problem. And then I've my calendar is full at least until Southeastuary. And so it'll take a little while for this to go
Be
through.
there.
What's that?
He's coming.
Oh, he's coming. Oh, good. Good. Well, that'll
It's
be
not
even
easy.
better. All right.
Thank you
Well,
endlessly. Thank you for the all that you do and also for spending time with me today. That means a lot.
it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure getting to know you and getting to hear your heart. And yeah, I think it's just like when you proposed this to me at Midwest Tour, I thought I think this is a good thing to do. So should be interesting.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Paul.
Take care, Brad.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye bye.